Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, President of Personal Edge Fitness, Garrett Williamson. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And thank you very much for your comments on our last podcast. It's our first quick hits. We talked about getting in the 100 ounces of water, which is kind of interesting since what we're talking about today. If you have any questions about the show, or as always, any questions dealing with health, fitness, and wellness, especially the myths associated with health, fitness, and wellness, you can reach us at our phone number, which is 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at my email address, which is Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. You can also contact us via our Facebook page, which is Personal Edge Fitness, and our website, which is personaledgefitness.com. Now, I had the pleasure of having several guests on this show, and I like to look to the experts, as you are well aware of me commonly saying I don't like to finger paint when I have access to Michelangelo. But I've talked a lot about drinking water. I've talked a lot about different health issues that we see, especially barriers to actually going and seeing a physician about some of these health checks and pre-screenings, things that we can avoid. And whenever I encounter some of things like that, I like to get a professional in the field to come and join us on the show to educate us a little more about that. And of course, as always, since hydration has so much to do with all aspects of health, I'm sure that we'll touch on that too. Today in that field, we're looking at the prostate, we're looking at urology. And on our show today, I'm pleased to have Dr. William Terry, urologist here in Mobile with
University Urology.
Thank you, University Urology. I'm sorry I couldn't remember the name. So William, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Garrett. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about hydration and prostate issues.
William, first thing I want to ask you is, how'd you get into medicine? Tell everybody what was your journey here?
Sure. I was born in Birmingham to Jeff Terry and Elizabeth Terry. Jeff, my father, was a pediatric urologist in his residency training at UAB there. When I was a wee lad, he went to Houston, the Children's and Women's Hospital in Houston, Texas, for his fellowship in pediatric urology. And then we moved back to his hometown, Mobile, Alabama, when I was about 4 years old. I was raised here, went to UMS Wright, graduated, went to the University of Virginia. I got my religious studies, Bachelor of Arts with pre-med on the side. And then I came back down here to USA, University of South Alabama, for medical school. Followed Dad up to UAB for my residency in urology. I did not do a fellowship. General urology was enough for me, had enough interest in all of the areas, didn't really want to specialize. So came back here and started practice in 2013 along with Dad. Had a wonderful 5 years with him, or 2 years with him before he passed in 2015, unfortunately. But a wonderful 5 years in private practice before making a switch to the university practice, which is where I am now.
I knew you'd made that switch, and we haven't talked a whole lot about that. I would take it you're in a great environment. Do you get to do any of the work as far as the residents are concerned?
Yeah, we're actually attempting working and we'll start our own urology training program at University of South Alabama. There's some hoops to jump through that take time. So we're diligently working on that. We've got some fantastic partners and leaders at the university that are helping us with that.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So that's important. But, it's an underserved population. They didn't have urology there for over a decade. So we came into kind of a blank slate of a place, and we had to just build it from the ground up, which has been tough, but very fulfilling. Very rewarding.
I'm sure. So, well, knowing you and your background on that's very fitting. And the reason I say that about the education is that you're a heck of a teacher. I know that's something that's in your blood. Knowing your father was something in your father's blood, because he was passionate about several different issues and spent a lot of time teaching people about that. So
he did.
Let's talk urology.
Okay.
So, what's the most common thing that you see? What do you deal with? People come to see you, and what have you?
I see mostly men, although a fair amount of women as well. It's probably a 75-25 split, men to women, and mostly for general urinary issues. I call myself a plumber, jokingly, a plumber for people, because people come to me, again, mostly men, for issues of urinary flow, anything that's inconvenient about bladder function, whether that's an overactive bladder, a bladder that's not working correctly, it's not emptying very well, a bladder that may be experiencing recurrent infections, and then up the urinary tract, kidneys. So if someone's having a lot of kidney stones, kidney infections, blockage of the kidneys, kidney cancers, urology essentially deals with everything in the urinary tract from kidneys through the ureters, which are the tubes that drain the kidneys,
Right.
to the bladder, which collects the urine for storage and appropriate emptying, prostate, urethra, anything through the urinary or reproductive tract we deal with. But to answer your question, mostly just flow issues is when I meet people for the first time.
That's the most common thing that you see. So
that and kidney stones, pretty close, but probably goes with the flow problems first.
I would guess so. Well, we're going to talk about the flow problem. In fact, I want to go ahead and get into it right now. One of my big things, of course, is hydration.
Yeah.
And how much water. I've got my board up behind me that everybody's seen before. So I've done a few podcasts on this. I just finished a podcast on how to get to 100 ounces.
Yeah.
And I researched this just to make sure I had this straight. Again, I've got this in my speech. I've got this in my talk about the NIH, National Institute of Health, the American Dietary Association, the Harvard Medical, Stanford Medical, Mayo Clinic, all recommending right around 100 ounces a day for an individual. It's something I preach a lot. It's something that top of the list on there because of what we deal with. We see mostly weight loss. It's cutting cravings, and the fact that your body is actually craving water and it's not craving food.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your field, when it comes to being a plumber for humans, what are we looking at as far as hydration issues or lack of hydration, or maybe somebody like me that maybe I'm doing too much? I don't know.
No, I think your recommendation of 100 ounces is well supported, and it will be a fantastic place to start and a fantastic goal to shoot for. I take a little bit more of a disease-specific approach to my water recommendations. Being that I deal with a lot of kidney stones, I tell people, and this is based on the American Urological Association's recommendations and countless papers, that you really need about 2.5 liters of urine output per day to adequately dilute your urine to reduce your chance to form kidney stones. How much water intake do you need to create 2.5 liters? Well, that depends on your own metabolism and your environment and how physically active you are.
Activity, lifestyle, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can sort of cheat, if the more caffeine you drink, or if you have any alcohol in your diet, or if you take any medicine that is a diuretic type of medicine, you can get sort of extra urine that you didn't really earn. You can sort of force more out than what should come out naturally. And I won't get into that too much, but a lot of patients ask me, how much should I drink to prevent these stones? Well, I'll say just whatever it takes to make at least 2 to 2.5 liters of water a day, of urine a day. But switching gears to the bladder, to the prostate side of things, that disease process, that organ system is more about symptom control, quality of life. A lot of the water alternatives, like if you're not going to drink water, what are you going to drink? Well, if you don't drink anything, if you just stay in a dehydrated state, your urine will get more concentrated. Your bladder doesn't really like storing, nasty concentrated urine. It wants to get rid of it more frequently. There's more of a chance for bladder stones to form with chronically dehydrated and concentrated urine. I can't really say that. I will say this: the less throughput your bladder, the fewer ounces of urine that you're actually passing per day, that could be a risk factor for infection, because your bladder likes to be flushed regularly. It's good to have a high urine output to kind of get rid of any bacteria that may have snuck into the bladder through the urethra. The benefits are myriad from avoiding bladder health urine flow standpoint. The more relaxed, the less inflamed your urinary tract is, the better it's going to work, better it's going to feel. That actually crosses over a little bit into sexual function as well. You don't want an inflamed, irritated urinary tract. I think square one is good hydration, good throughput, and not allowing concentrated urine to sit there, not allowing infection to set in, and not allowing stones to form.
You were talking about having that concentrated urine and what have you. That at some point is going to be kind of a toxicity issue, is it not? I mean, is that what you're talking about with the bacteria and what have you? Yeah,
sure. So a lot of guys have prostates that are tight and that make it difficult for the bladder to empty at a low pressure and completely. And so if you have residual urine in your bladder that's hanging on after you try to empty. And if that urine's concentrated, bladder stones can happen, all sorts of, the infection. If you get a little bit of bacteria in the urine and it's not getting all the way out, it just kind of becomes a petri dish in there. It'll get murky, it'll get sensitive, and then at some point it'll become symptomatic and turn into what we call cystitis or a UTI.
That's why I was wondering if it was going to be UTI. So I know people that have had problems with that. That's what I was driving at. I figured that's what problems you'd run into. So
and on top of that too, I'm not a GI expert, but we worry about constipation in urology a lot. For a number one plumber, I'll talk about the number two plumbing quite a bit because the rectum and the bladder and the prostate and a lot of the sexual organs and nerves that go to both of those organs, they are all in the same neighborhood.
Okay.
If you're dehydrated, if you're not drinking enough water, that has bowel effects as well. And so the colon will try to take as much water out of whatever is in it to make up for the fluid deficit, and it'll just leave a really hard dehydrated stool burden down there. That's not good for quality of life either. So that pulls in. And so I got into all that saying, well, this is what happens if you don't drink enough water. But the other option is, well, what if you're drinking highly caffeinated, highly sugared, highly carbonated, acidic drinks, alcohol, anything else other? I mean, all these, every drink has water in it.
Right.
But water is so great because it acts as, it dilutes impurities. It helps us get rid of toxins. I have a nerdy little phrase I tell all my patients with a smirk on my face. I say, look, you got stones, you got infection, you got bladder problems, you got this. The solution for pollution is dilution.
I love it. It's one of my wife's favorite phrases.
I love it.
In doing shelter medicine on shelter dogs is the fact that when they have something come in, solution to pollution is dilution.
Yeah. And my family gets tired of me. I mean, I don't say that verbatim every time, but whenever my kids or my sweet wife Marley, or whenever they're feeling ill, I'm like, are you drinking enough water? You hydrating. So that's important. And if you're giving your bladder and your urinary system a lot of other stuff, all these other chemicals along with water, you can get by for a while on that. But as a bladder ages, it does get more sensitive to those things.
I understand.
I've got people who've drunk a pot of coffee every morning for their whole life. They come in at 75 years of age and they're going more frequently. Maybe they're starting to leak. Their bladders are kind of getting tired of it.
Right.
Coffee's not bad for you. I tell people dark coffee is great. It's got more antioxidants than pomegranate juice. But to put all the cream and sugar into just too much of it, too much of anything is bad.
Now, did you catch that? Did you catch what he just said there, which I think is fantastic because, this is the top of the health food chain. We're talking to a physician here. And so, no, but what he said there was key. You hear me say it all the time. It's not the food itself. It's the amounts. It's the amounts that are the problem. That's something we get asked all the time. People hear me talk about drinking water. They think I'm saying just drink water. No. Love coffee myself, always have. It's the amounts of these things. This is why we have an obesity problem. It's not a type of food problem. It's an amount of food problem, which is what's causing that.
I went out to lunch right before I came here, and this is what I do a lot, and some people think I'm weird because of it, and you might not like it, but I'll fill half my cup up with lemonade and the other half with water.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
I do the same with Gatorade and stuff, and if I feel like a flavor, I'll just get used to a dilute flavor. It's great.
Right, and that changes in your taste buds and the whole 9 yards as far as that goes. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Speaking into what we do, and there's something real important I don't want to leave out that we want to talk about, and that is some normal checks that you recommend people get. But before we get to that, weight loss, weight control, being out of shape, how does that affect what you see on a day-to-day basis?
Obesity is certainly a pandemic, and it affects every cell in the body. Excess adipose tissue, excess fat tissue has an endocrine function. It can change what happens to testosterone in a man's body. The more adipose tissue that's there, there's actually an enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen. So estrogen levels can go up. So from an endocrine standpoint, that's pretty major. You've got, the effect of obesity just on overall energy level and how you feel. It's harder to do exercise. There's studies done on a hormone called leptin, Leptin, and I'm not an expert on that, but it's like once you get to a certain leptin state, it's hard to go back from that, and your cravings are in a large part, I understand, based on that. From a urological standpoint, the more adipose tissue you have, there is actually an increased incidence of kidney stones.
Oh wow! Okay.
Can't totally clarify that, but we've seen that borne out. It's also harder to treat kidney stones in folks who are heavier. When we CAT scan somebody and see stones, and if we need to do surgery, one common measurement I do is stone to skin distance. So if you've got greater than 20 centimeters between the skin on your back and the stone in your kidney going in your body, then one of our most common ways to treat that stone is not a good option for you all of a sudden. So you have to undergo more invasive procedures to get the stone out.
I understand.
I deal with a lot of sexual dysfunction as well in my practice, and testosterone levels. I already mentioned endocrine in general, but extra fat tissue and being overweight can impair that as well in significant ways, mentally and physically. Diabetes, it goes hand in hand with that.
Of course.
Nerve function, the nerve to muscle synapses are affected. Getting back down to the bladder, getting back back down to the urinary
Yes.
tract, there's an increased incidence of overactive spastic bladder, and the opposite as well, bladders that kind of lose their feeling and that may get weak and retain urine, and that leads to all the problems we discussed earlier.
It goes in that hand in hand. How many problems that we see that are related to obesity? Somebody comes into us for a knee problem, and we find out it's not this really your knee's fine. It's just not handling the weight, and can affect so many things, just like in your practice. I really want to get to something we were talking about earlier, and that is the screenings. Now we had Dr. Sanders on talking about colon screenings. Everybody's afraid of the big C, that common fear, but there's so many ways to avoid it. One you and I were talking about there a minute ago was prostate cancer.
Prostate cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer among men. It's not the most lethal, but it certainly is lethal to a significant portion of the men who are diagnosed with it. It is a highly curable cancer if we found it early enough.
Right.
It's a highly hereditary cancer. If you have a first-degree relative, so that means if you're a man and you have a brother or a father who had prostate cancer, you've got a statistically significant higher risk of getting it yourself. Wow. That's me. I've had multiple. My father had it. My grandfather had it, and I've had other family members have it. So I just turned 40. I'm about to get my first PSA and digital rectal exam. I should have already got it, but I haven't gotten it yet. I've been a little busy. Right. So for Caucasian males, family history like that, start at 40. Without the family history, start at 50 with a PSA blood test and finger check.
Sure.
For African-American males, genetics dictate that they actually start a little earlier. So age 40 for most African-American males who don't have family history of it.
Right.
If they do have family history, maybe even a little bit earlier, 35 or so. So if we can get that done and check this very imperfect measurement. PSA is not that sensitive or specific for prostate cancer. It's just a great starting point because we don't have anything else that easy to do. Now we're getting into MRIs. In my practice at University of Urology, if you've got a concerning PSA trend, we'll get an MRI of your prostate and get down to the anatomy of it, and we'll do the finger check and all that. Yeah. And then if we see a good target, you got to do a biopsy. There's no other way on God's green earth to tell if you have cancer other than by getting a biopsy.
Right, okay, I got you.
And there's a lot of horror stories from biopsies, and I think that's probably one barrier to care.
Right.
People hear about, my uncle got real sick and had to go in the hospital, or he had bleeding, or he was peeing blood, or something like that. Yeah. And a lot of guys get scared off, and they don't want to even start the process of checking it because they don't want to
when it's so avoidable.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So prostate cancers now are treated either with surgery or radiation, or increasingly we are learning about prostate cancers that actually do not require primary therapy. Oh, wow. There are some that have an indolent biochemistry and biology, and that we can follow those safely for years and years. And often, a guy who's diagnosed at age 70 with a really low-grade prostate cancer, often we won't ever really even have to do anything about that cancer because we just know more about the genetics of it now.
Yeah, that's tremendous. So that PSA, I've heard about that for a long time and how it's a fantastic indicator. From what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're having that regular PSA checks, you're looking for a change. You're trying to get a baseline first.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you're looking for a change.
You can tell a lot about the baseline. If you're 40 getting your first PSA check and it's below a level of 1.0, that's a great indicator that you're probably going to be okay the rest of your life. Now, of course, we'll still check. Sure. And I won't it's a deep well to talk about how often you should check PSA and if we should check it at all. There was a large controversy about 10 years ago when the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, a committee made up of 0 urologists, recommended that we stop checking PSA because it wasn't cost effective or whatever, or the number needed to check was so high to prevent a mortality, to prevent a death. We knew then that was bogus. And when that recommendation came out, there were a lot more higher grade prostate cancers that showed up a few years later because men were not able to do that. So that's being revised now. But PSA, it's not perfect. It's a great place to start. Sure. But sooner the better. And I think if you have any questions about it, ask your primary doc. But if you have any further questions, just get a referral to a urologist.
Do you know if the regular PSA checks, if that's covered by insurance typically or not? Okay.
Yeah, one a year.
Okay.
Usually. Okay. A lot of guys they're worried about it. Maybe they have a strong family history of it and they want to get it checked like every 3 months. Sure. That would not be covered, unfortunately.
Right.
Only way that's covered is if you have a prostate cancer diagnosis already. Okay.
There's one question I had about that because I've heard this quite often, but if you're a cyclist, I heard that it's good that your urologist knows that you're a cyclist because of...
Sure, yeah. So direct pressure on the prostate can... You asked me about PSA numbers, and I said if you have below a certain number, that's a good indicator.
Right.
Otherwise, we want to get that baseline and then establish a trend. And if you go up if your PSA increases by more than 1 point over a 12-month period, that's a concerning velocity. We call that the PSA velocity. So we might scratch the surface on that a little bit more. I may say, okay, come back in 6 months, let's check it again. Or I may say, go ahead and get an MRI. But if it's under a 1 point per year increase, generally we think that that's okay as long as it doesn't eventually get out of range. PSA can go up 1 year, down 1 year. It's highly volatile. Back to your other question, anything that puts direct pressure on the prostate, whether that is a motorcycle, a bike saddle, a lawnmower, a tractor, sitting in a hard chair, programming a computer for a while, even sexual intercourse, post-climax, the muscles that squeeze the prostate, those things can literally squeeze a little bit more PSA out of your prostate gland and into your bloodstream. And if you get checked right after any of those activities, you may have a falsely elevated PSA level. So I tell my guys, hey, be chill for a day or so. Don't do any of that straddle activity kind of stuff. Refrain from intercourse, and let's just get a normal, natural baseline, relaxed PSA on you.
Glad to hear that. I'd heard about that causing a problem, and I think it's well. Of course, I think it's great that your physician pretty much knows everything about your physical health and some of your lifestyle as far as that goes for diagnosing those problems. So.
That's right.
If anybody's got any questions about this, of course, they can call the show at 251-278-3343. But as far as getting in touch with you, if anybody had any follow-up or wanted to get referrals to you and whatever, what kind of contact information?
Of course, you can just Google University Urology, Mobile, Alabama. There's probably a few other university urologies out there, but we're the one at University of South Alabama. Our office number is 660-5930. We do have a Facebook page as well, and we're going to, in about probably a couple months, we're going to get a YouTube channel up and going with a lot of this kind of stuff, a lot of basic patient educational videos. We'll even have pre and post-op tips and tricks videos.
Fantastic.
For general public consumption.
Not just the hydration, all the other checks, especially avoiding what I know of is a very, very common cancer. And I'm glad to hear that it's as treatable as it is, but just early detection.
Yeah. And, the other one that I like to mention is bladder cancer. Bladder cancer is a lot more insidious than prostate cancer. It's very dangerous. And a common risk factor for bladder cancer that most people don't know about is cigarette smoking.
Oh, wow.
You think about lung cancer with that, but tobacco exposure is a high risk factor for bladder cancer.
Oh, wow.
It's a very disfiguring cancer, a lot more lethal, like I said. And whenever I see folks smoking, I feel so bad for them. I mean, there's so many negative effects of smoking. In my world, that's bladder cancer.
But that's one I would not have thought of that most people wouldn't think about it. There's a bladder cancer associated with it. So,
if you ever see any blood at all in your urine, don't just say, it's an infection and drink more water to try to cure it. If you see blood in the urine, get to your primary care doc, make sure it's not. If it's an infection, great, easily treated. But if they see blood without signs of infection, they need to get you over to one of us, and we need to do an x-ray and a scope and a workup.
Appreciate that added information. Definitely is something I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't. So I really appreciate you joining us today and being on the show. So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and keep drinking that water. Keep diluting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you hear it from the expert here yet again. So I'm pushing hydration. I'm always talking about drinking water and how important that is. But there's something as important, if not more important, that we discussed today, and that happened to deal with early detection of cancers. And I don't think there's a single person walking the face of the earth that is not afraid of that big C. And this is a very, 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 very common cancer. But early detection, as you heard Dr. Terry said, it's highly treatable. So get out there and get that checked. Again, if you have any questions about this, you're welcome to reach out to me at 251-278-3343. Of course, you can contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com or our website, personaledgefitness.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you tuning in and finding out more about your urinary health. One more way we help you reach your level of wellness.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.